how to increase mobility step by step. So this is something that I'm excited to talk about because I have a lot of personal experience in it. You know, when I got my back surgery in 2022, I couldn't even touch my knees with straight legs. And overall, I was just really, really tight. And so this was one of the biggest things that I've worked on for the past like 6 months to a year, is actually gaining mobility and being able to move and increase flexibility and everything like that. And so this is a complete step-to-step guide. And what's interesting is that I think a lot of baseball players right now, I've talked to many baseball players over the past 6 months, and a lot of them think that mobility is the biggest thing that's going to be an unlock for their pitching velocity and velocity on the mound. And so this is going to be a complete step-to-step guide on how to actually gain mobility. But the first thing that I would note is that mobility probably isn't going to be like an unlock. So a lot of players think like, okay, I need it if I'm able to open up this, or if I'm able to increase hip internal rotation or hip external rotation, something like that, then they're going to get an instant, 3 to 5 miles an hour. And usually that's not the case. Gaining mobility, flexibility, gaining range is not something that it's a slow, gradual process. And so actually getting that range is going to be a little bit slower. And so it's not going to be an instant unlock. And even when you get that range, you still need to be able to be strong through that range and explode out of that range. And so a lot of the time it's not going to be an unlock, but it definitely helps. And it's something that you should be working on at all times, honestly. And so this is one of the biggest regrets that I had during my career, is that I never really focused on mobility. I just focused on the output of things, power, strength, throwing velocity, all of these things. And I was just like, yeah, mobility, like I don't even want to do that. But looking back, that's one of the biggest focuses for me now, getting to 100. And so, yeah, it's extremely important. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with a little bit of theory of like what we'll be doing and why we're doing it. And then I'll move on to, we'll change and go to the gym, and then I can show you a couple exercises of exactly what I do. But this stuff is really important. So let's get right into it. So let's just say this is a muscle. Okay. And the two things that you need to know for gaining mobility, flexibility, and stuff like that is this thing called the Golgi tendon organ, the GTO, and then the muscle spindle. Okay, the muscle spindle is like something like this inside of the muscle. And the last thing is like, this is the brain. And so these are the three things that you kind of need to know. And I'm going to go through each of them in 1 second. So with the brain, a lot of like gaining mobility, flexibility is like teaching the brain that it's okay to get into these ranges, because the brain is always going to want to protect the body, right? And so if the muscle is stretched and it's getting into a position where it's kind of uncomfy, then it's going to stop you from getting into those positions. And so the first thing is like, it's like a neural adaptation to where you just need to teach your brain that it's actually okay to get into these ranges and that it won't get injured. And so that's the first step. So, and I'll get into how you actually do this in a second. Muscle spindles. Muscle spindles are the things that create stretch reflex. So, when like, for example, you're doing bench press, if you come down and you don't pause and it's just a smooth motion, you're going to be able to lift a lot more weight than if you come down really slow, pause, and then go. The stretch reflex is like, the muscle spindles detect when the muscles are stretched, and then it activates a contraction to protect the muscle. And so if you put yourself into a position where like the muscle doesn't, it's a little bit much for the muscle, and you put yourself in that too quickly, then it's going to activate the muscle spindles, and it's going to activate a contraction to protect yourself. And so this can actually inhibit mobility and flexibility. So the key point for this is you want to desensitize this. Okay. And then the last thing is the GTO. The GTO is it's a thing in the muscle where it detects for mobility. It detects how much stretch is happening in the muscle, and when it gets to a point where there's enough force, then it tells the muscle to relax so that the muscle doesn't continue to stretch and then like tear. Like if it's contracted like this and it keeps stretching and the Golgi tendon doesn't tell it to relax, then it might damage the muscle or tear it or something like that. And so it's stretching, and then when it detects enough force to the muscle and enough stretch, then it relaxes. And so a key point with this is that you want to stimulate the GTO, because this is what tells the muscle to actually relax, and so you actually want to increase this. Okay, so the 3 parts that we want to keep in mind is, firstly, we want to get into deep ranges to actually tell the brain that it's okay to get into these deep ranges, because a lot of it can be with the brain, and it can be like neural pathways and stuff like that. The spindle, we want to desensitize this a little bit, because this is what prevents us from getting into deep ranges. It activates like a protective mechanism to contract the muscle instead of actually relaxing and letting us get into deep ranges. And the GTO, this is a little bit more simple, but we just want to apply enough force to where the GTO activates, and then it allows the muscle to relax. All right, so on to my favorite ways to actually get all of these things to happen. So one thing that I will say is that, when I was struggling with mobility, I would stretch every single day, but then I felt like I wasn't making any kind of progress. And so I was looking around and looking for different answers. And one of the things that really helped me, and I think will help you as well, is something called loaded stretching. Okay, and so loaded stretching is basically going through stretches but with weights pulling you. And so a good example would be something like the Jefferson curl, where, if you were to go like this and try to touch your toes, then you might be able to, you might not be able to, whatever. But if you have 45 pounds in each hand and you do the same thing, then it's gonna pull you into deeper ranges. And so this is so good for a couple reasons. And obviously you wanna start lighter than that. I've been doing this for like a year now, and I can probably do like 45 pounds on each side. But you do want to start out very lightly with like any kind of loaded stretching. But when you go through a loaded stretch, so what is this doing? This is increasing the amount of stretch and the range that you're able to get, which is telling your brain that it's okay to get into these ranges. Okay, so it's giving your brain a new signal to be like, okay, we're okay to get into these ranges, and we're not going to get injured in these ranges. And once the brain feels that, then it starts to become comfortable with actually getting into these ranges in the future. Okay. The next one is the Golgi tendon. So when you're going through a loaded stretch and you're at end range, then it's applying a lot of stretch and a lot of force to the muscle, and it activates the Golgi tendon to actually let your muscles relax. And so when you do these loaded stretches, you're in these positions, and it's a lot of force. You'll be able to feel it. And it's a big stretch. And then the Golgi tendon is going to relax. Now the last one with the spindles, this is a little bit trickier, but the big thing to remember is to start light, because if you go too heavy, then you'll feel it. Like if you go too heavy and, for example, you're doing a Jefferson curl and you're going down and you're doing too heavy than you should be, then the muscles are going to start to contract. Like you're going to feel yourself like resisting the load like this. And this is a lot to do with like the muscle spindles and like the protective mechanism. So when you're going down and then you can feel yourself kind of like contracting and it's not like relaxing, then you're going too heavy. So you kind of need to find a good weight for all of these things to happen at once. So the muscle spindles aren't going to work against you if you have a proper weight and you're able to relax through it. Then it's actually going to desensitize these muscle spindles, and these three things are going to be working for you instead of against you. So one of the things I would recommend is just start really light. But this is something you can do for any kind of body part, and we'll go through each one as we go through it. All right, so the next thing is static stretching. And so when I was doing a bunch of research on how to actually gain mobility, flexibility, range, stuff like that, the overwhelming answer was that you just need to do a lot of static stretching. And this was kind of like disappointing to hear, because this was something that I was doing pretty regularly and I wasn't seeing very much progress with it. But for me, it wasn't like a big needle mover in terms of like gaining range, but it's still very, very powerful. And so how you would want to do this. So firstly, with static stretching, to activate the GTO and get that to relax, you want to be static stretching for a pretty long period of time. So like at least, I would say like 30 seconds. So you want to hold it for like 30 seconds. And this is for the spindles as well. Like you kind of feel it when you get into like when it's static stretch, it's kind of like uncomfy at the start, but then everything starts to relax. And so that's just like the GTO activating, and then the muscle spindle is just like telling itself that, okay, it's okay. Like we don't have to be protective and contract and get out of this range. And so the optimal range is like 30 seconds or more, so that these things start to take action. And then also obviously like the brain with it. It starts to tell the brain, okay, we're fine, we're okay in this deep range, like we're not gonna get injured. And so with static stretching though, the biggest thing with static stretching was frequency. And so if you wanna incorporate some of this, I would do them like every single day. Like do like 30 seconds each body part, like every single day. And I think you'll see a lot of good results. Personally, I don't really like static stretching too much. I prefer the loaded stretching, and that's something that I got a lot of results from. But I would definitely start here, and I've got a bunch of good exercises I can show you in the gym after this. But yeah, the science says that static stretching is the best, so I would definitely incorporate this and see how much that can help you. All right, so the next thing is stretch strength training. And so how does mobility actually lead to an increase in performance? Well, the best analogy that I have heard is like if there's someone who is sprinting, right? And there are two people sprinting, and one person is sprinting 20 meters, and then the other person is going to be sprinting 30 meters. Like, who is going to be moving who's going to have the better top speed? And the answer is the guy who is sprinting at 30 meters, because he has all of this time to accelerate versus this guy only has this much time to accelerate. And so how this kind of applies to mobility and like performance enhancement in terms of like pitching velocity is that if you're able to get into like these deeper ranges, then you have more time to apply force to the ball. And so, this might be like a simple example, but let's just say, for example, like you have better spinal mobility. So you're able to get into these deeper positions and you're able to apply force for a longer period of time versus if you're not able to get into those positions, you're here and it's just like here. So basically with mobility is that you're able to get into these ranges to where you can apply more force throughout the throw. But the catch is this: even if you're able to get into these ranges, if you're not strong in those positions and you aren't able to apply a lot of strength and explode out of these ranges, then that range isn't going to do much for you. And so how we actually train that is stretch strength training. And basically what this is training these deeper positions where the muscle's really stretched. An example would be like a one-arm dumbbell press or dumbbell press in general. And so you have your dumbbells right here. And instead of like stopping like at 90 degrees like most people do, you bring it down and really stretch all of these muscles in the front of your shoulder, in the pec, and everything like that. And you're getting into a deep position and then you press out of it. So if you have like, 100 pounds in your hand, then it's really pushing you into deep positions. So you're getting this loaded stretch effect like we just talked about, but you have to press out of it. And so you're building all that strength in these deep positions. Another one that I like is like the ATG split squat, and we'll go through a lot of these exercises. But basically the point of stretch strength training is to get like a weighted loaded stretch effect, really stretching your muscles and then building strength in these deep positions so that we're actually strong in these deep positions and not just like, okay, yeah, we can get into it, but we're weak type thing. We want to be strong in these deep positions to be able to explode out of. And so everything has to come back to pitching, because that's what we're trying to maximize is pitching velocity, pitching performance, and all of that with mobility. And so yeah, it can be like a safety thing as well, but I kind of like to tie it all back together to performance enhancement. And so stretch strength training is exactly that. We're getting a loaded stretch effect and then actually building strength out of these positions. All right, so the last thing that I think about with mobility is stretch power and actually incorporating all of that into the throw. And so with stretch power, basically we talked about stretch strength. So like heavy loads pulling you into deep positions and then being able to be strong out of these positions. Stretch power is basically just being able to explode out of these positions. And so it might be, going back to like the pec and this example, it might be a medicine ball where you get into these deep positions and then get yourself out. It might be like a push-up right here where you're getting into the deep position and then you explode out of it. And something that I do a lot is like medicine ball stuff. I work on spinal extension a lot. And so like getting into these deep positions and then exploding out of it. And so that is kind of like stretch power. And you can incorporate this into your throwing by a lot of like pliable drills. And so again, like with the spinal extension stuff that I've been working on, I've been, pliable in hand and then going through these exercises to actually access those ranges and be able to throw and explode out of these ranges. And so this is like the final piece of the puzzle for me and what has helped me gain velocity and like actually use this range that I've developed into the throw. And so for this, we want to gain more range and take advantage of the stretch reflex. And so like you probably heard, like with the vertical jump, the quicker you go down, the higher you jump. And that's because of the stretch reflex. The quicker you go down, the more the spindles are activated and they produce a greater contraction for you to jump higher. And so for the throw, we're just training this. Like we're trying to get into these positions really quickly and then taking advantage of the stretch reflex. And so the last part is developing power through deep ranges, through stuff like medicine ball and pliable exercises, to actually translate all of this extra range and strength that you built into the delivery and into the throw. All right, so let's get into the good stuff, the actual exercises that I go through, and some exercises that you can incorporate. I'm gonna be going through like static stuff, loaded stuff, stretch strength stuff, and then we'll go to the field and do some of the medicine ball and pliable stuff. But let's start with the static stretching, loaded stretching type stuff. I'm completely cold right now, and so this will actually be something that I will go through as a warm-up to get my body moving so it's mobile and ready to go out and throw. So my approach with this is gonna be from the feet up. So we're gonna start with the feet and then work ourselves up. So diving straight in. First stretch. This is a big toe stretch. Just in here, your feet are up and you're really feeling a big stretch in your big toes. And I'm stretching the feet here because everything is connected, you know, from the feet up into the calves, up into the hamstring, up into my lower back and up. Like everything is connected. There's a nerve that runs all the way through. And so if there's tightness in any part of that body, in any part, then it's gonna lead to tightness in like my lower back or something like that. So I wanna keep it all loose, especially on the back of my body, because that's where my weakness is my lower back and the back of my body. I have bad mobility in the back of my body. So once I get that done, I'm going into the Caesar to stretch out the front of the calf, which is the tib. And when you're doing this, like I'm not too great at it, but there's a deep, deep stretch in the tibs. Okay, next one. Diving straight into the hamstrings. And so for the hamstrings, you can either do like a static stretch right here, or the one that I really like is a loaded stretch. So I'm doing 20s right here, nothing special, not heavy at all. And so a big thing for this is just to make sure you're going light, you're starting light. And let the weights pull you into deep positions. And for this, I usually do like 10 reps, but for this video purpose, I will do like 2 reps. And so, super tight on my right side. And if you're tight on one side, you might want to even do like a couple more reps on that side, because like my right side, it takes a lot of time for it to warm up. And so that's a loaded stretch for my hamstrings. Next, I go into an elephant walk, which is kind of like a loaded stretch, kind of like a dynamic stretch. I would say it's more of a loaded stretch. But you're right here, it's to open up the hamstrings, the lower back. And so get your hands, get them to touch the floor, start bent knees, and then just try to extend them without taking your hands off the floor. And you'll be able to feel like a deep stretch in like your lower back, hamstrings, or your calf. Wherever you're really tight, you're gonna feel this. And it's more of a loaded stretch because you're like forcing your body to go into these ranges. And this was one of the biggest exercises that really fixed my lower back mobility, because it really taught my brain that, okay, it's okay to be getting into these ranges. And it opened everything up. From the hamstring, the lower back, my glutes, everything. And so That one, elephant walk, supersetted with the Jefferson curl, which is another loaded stretch exercise that I really love. This one though, you do need to start light, like seriously, because if you go too heavy and then this could really mess up your back. But I'm doing 45 pounds here. I usually just use the bar. And so the key with this one is just to be really, really slow, relaxed, and let it just pull you. If you're resisting it or you feel it like you're tensing up, then it's too heavy for you. Just let it relax you into position. So starting from the head into the neck, and let it just pull you. And up. So that's the Jefferson curl. And the Jefferson curl could be thought of as a strength exercise because like you're getting into these deep positions and you do have to fire out of it and be strong in this rounded back position, which is really, really good for like the smaller muscles in your spine. Because when you're in this rounded position, like it's not like the glutes or hamstrings that are gonna be firing like if you're in a Romanian deadlift, then that's going to be firing. But when you're in this rounded position, it's all your spine and like the small muscles in your spine, which are going to have to bring you up. Okay, so that was spinal flexion and your ability to go forward with the spine. So moving on to the hips, I'd like to start with a pigeon push-up. So you've probably seen something like this where it's just like a pigeon stretch right here. But to add a loaded component to it, you get on a bench and then you take your hands off and like your body weight is pulling you into deeper ranges. And if you get good enough, you can hold weights. I have really good external rotation, and so this isn't really a problem for me, but you can even go up and make it like a push-up to make it a strength exercise. But if you just want to focus more on flexibility and loaded stretching, then you can just hold it right here and you'll feel a deep, deep stretch. And so usually what I do is like, I'll hold it for like a little bit, like 30 seconds or something. And when I feel it, just relax and like loosen up, then I'll start to do some push-ups with the glute just to start to get some blood flow, strength in there. And I'll do like 10 reps. Okay, hip internal rotation. So this is something that is my biggest weakness, and I honestly think it's structural because I've been working on this for so long and it has never improved. But one exercise that I really do like is a loaded hip internal rotation lift. So at the bottom, I'm getting a deep stretch because the weight is pulling my knee into deeper internal rotation. And then I'm lifting it up to build strength. And so I'll do like 10 reps on each side. Really feel that stretch. It's like a deep stretch right here. And then push up. Okay, moving on to the hip flexor. So there are 3 exercises here that I really, really like. The first one is just a normal wall couch stretch. So this is one of the static versions that I do like a lot. So you're on the wall and you're just holding this. But the biggest results I got from this is actually loading this position and actively stretching the hip flexor. And so I'm grabbing some dumbbells here. I do go a little bit heavy, start light though. I'm going 45 pounds on each side. And then I'm actively going forward and back. Stretch the hip flexor back. Stretch, and then back. Stretch, hold, and then back. And this is just a really, really deep stretch, something that I've never really felt before for the hip flexor. It's even deeper than just doing a normal couch stretch, which is an intense stretch in of itself. But when I do this, and when I started doing this, I saw a lot more progress in my hip flexor length and flexibility, which was, super important for me because having tight hip flexors was causing all sorts of issues for my lower back. And so this would be something that I would start incorporating if you have tight hip flexors. When you have tight hip flexors, and tight and weak hip flexors, it pulls you into this position where this is really, really tight. So it's like tilting your pelvis to where it's like this. It tilts your pelvis this way so that you're in this position, which can cause a lot of issues for your lower back. And so do some of those exercises. It'll definitely loosen it up. The last exercise is a strength exercise, and it's the ATG split squat. And so, again, start light with these. This is not an easy exercise, and you do need a lot of mobility to be able to do this. So right here, the front foot stays on the ground. That's how I like it. And then you try to bring your glute to your heel on the front leg. So you glute and your hamstring to your calf. Right here. Try to get your hamstring to touch the calf. Hold, and you're gonna feel a deep stretch in the hip flexor, and then push up. And so when you're getting into this position, you're feeling a super deep stretch in the hip flexor right here. And so it's like a loaded stretch for that hip flexor. And then it's a stretch strength exercise for your knee right here. It's putting your knee into end range. You probably never trained something like that, where you go into such a deep knee flexion range. We do squats and stuff like that, where we get to 90 degrees and then come up. But this was something that really improved my knee health and strength, is training it through a full range of motion. And so that's a strength exercise, and also a loaded stretch. So we did the hip flexors, we did the external rotation of the hip, internal rotation of the hip. Now let's move on to the inner thighs. Okay, so for the inner thighs, 2 exercises that are really, really good for it. The first one is a Cossack squat. So this is a loaded stretch. Coming here, getting into position, and then usually I have 2 kettlebells to really push me into deep positions, but today I'm just using one. So get into this position, and this kettlebell is gonna push you down into a deep position, and you're gonna feel a really deep stretch here, and then push up. And so get into this position, and then hold, and then really feel that stretch, and then come up. This one is a little bit more advanced. I'm not even gonna do it right now because I don't wanna pull something. But you're basically getting into a split position as deep as you can, and then you just try to touch your head to the floor. And I'm not gonna be able to do this right now because I'm cold, but when I'm super loose and warmed up, I'm able to get my head to the floor. And so this is a loaded stretch because your body weight is pulling you into a deeper position in this split position. But then also being able to do this and get your head to the floor and get yourself up requires a lot of stability and strength. And so this is one of my favorite exercises for the inner thighs. Another great one for the inner thighs is the seated good morning. And so this is a loaded stretch plus a stretch strength exercise. And for me, this doesn't really I don't feel it as much, and I don't like it as much as something like the Cossack squat or the split pancake. But some people love this exercise and feel a deep, deep stretch. And so how you do this is either have a barbell or have some dumbbells in front of you right here, and then up, and then you're going deep. You're trying to keep your chest up, and then you should feel a deep stretch in the inner thighs. And then up. So I do this exercise because it's like a weird stretch to where I feel it in a place that I can't feel it in any other stretch. And so that probably means that it's a muscle that isn't stretched, isn't worked on. And so I just do it. But yeah, I would definitely try it out because a lot of people love this exercise and get a lot of benefits from this. So the benefit is like stronger lower back, you know, more flexible through here because you feel deep stretch in here. All right, so for spinal extension going backwards, this is one of my favorite exercises, is the cobra stretch. So right here, and you're just dipping into I would say this is a loaded stretch because you're like putting yourself into a stretch. And you're actively putting yourself into an intense stretch. So it's right here and down and hold and back. So I'll usually hold it for like 30 to 60 seconds. And it's a really intense stretch right here. And it really opens it up. And this is one exercise that has really helped me for spinal extension. I'm still experimenting with a lot of stuff spinal extension wise because that is a pretty big weakness of mine. I can't really do a great glute bridge yet, which means just like my spinal capacity just isn't there. But that one and also the dumbbell pullover. So the cobra stretch was mainly for like the lower back and extension. A great one for the upper back, and thoracic is the dumbbell pullover. So it's basically just cross bench dumbbell pullover right here. And then you have your upper back on the bench and you're dropping in and feeling that stretch and back up. So you can hold it for a loaded stretch right here, and you can just hold it. Or for a stretch strength exercise, get into it and explode out of it. So last two exercises, this is more for the upper body. First one is the dumbbell fly. And you're just holding it at the bottom to really open up the front of the shoulder, the pecs, everything like that. So you're up, and then just hold this position, and you feel a deep, deep stretch. And then for the lat, I love the lat hang, or the side hang, whatever it is. It's a static / loaded stretch, just right here, and you're just holding. And you feel a deep stretch in the lat right here. So those were kind of the exercises that I go through in terms of gaining mobility. We didn't go through too much on the stretch strength stuff, but that's more for like when you're actually lifting. So like dumbbell press, for example, you're getting into a deep position and then you're pressing up. Lat pull down, like getting really big stretch and then pull down. Even like the ATG split squat, like Romanian deadlifts is a great one to where you're right here, getting into deep range right here, feel a really big stretch and then getting out of it. And so stretch strength is something that you really train when you're lifting, but that was kind of like the
loaded stretch routine that I go through and that I've been going through that actually has made me, that actually has helped me a lot gain mobility and open up my body and stuff like that. So for the last part of this video, let's go over to the field and I'll show you some stuff to actually incorporate this stuff into the throw and how I've done it for myself. All right, so the last part is stretch power. So learning how to explode out of these deep positions that you develop. And so I'll give you a clear example. For me, I'm working on a lot of spinal extension, thoracic extension, like opening this up. And so that's good and all if I'm able to develop that, but I need to be able to actually use that in the throw. And so I use stuff like the spinal wave throw and the javelin throw to where I'm getting into these ranges and then I'm exploding out of them like this. And so for you, I don't know what that might be. It might be side to side. Sorry, I know it's very windy. Hopefully you can hear me, but it might be like side bending. So one that I really like for side bend is the roll and throw. And so you're coming here and then you're getting into these deep position, side bend, and then you explode out of it. So right here, bang. And again, when I was working on flexion, I would do stuff like the javelin rotational throw where I'll be in full flexion right here and then learning how to use that into the throw. And so it's a little bit more difficult if, you know, what you're working on is like hip internal rotation or something like that. But for a lot of the spine, upper body stuff, you can actually do it and use all of that range that you develop and put it into the throw. And so the first thing is like medicine ball stuff, you can do that. And then the next one is like plyo balls, and use heavy plyo balls for this because it's just way easier to relax into these positions. And so for me, it's like I do stuff like for spinal extension, like this, and I'm just putting it into the throat. And so whatever you're really focusing on, you can kind of like emphasize that in your throwing, like spinal flexion stuff. I did a lot of that. If you're working on like upper body mobility, overhead mobility, stuff like that, you can do stuff like this, where you're really emphasizing the flexibility in your upper body. Again, for like the side bending and the rotational aspect, I love the roll and throw. So there are a bunch of exercises that actually put you in that position to where you actually have to be able to throw and use those ranges in the throw. And so those are the 4 stages I think about. It's actually develop flexibility and mobility, and then through like static stretching, loaded stretching, and then build strength in those positions through stretch strength exercises, and then learn how to use those ranges and explode out of them through like medicine ball stuff and like heavy pliable work. And then all of that should translate into your delivery and make it like usable range that actually helps your delivery and pitching velocity.